Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. And today I'm going to share with you some stories from this past week watching the Mars-Saturn-Uranus dynamic perfect. Of course, Mars is still going to make its square to Uranus over the weekend. But I thought it would be a really fun time to kind of launch this new series that I've had in mind for a while, which I'm calling Grabbed. And it's something that I'm super excited about because it's something that you guys can get involved with as well. And I'm going to explain that as we go. But here's the gist of it. In ancient astrology, the planets were sometimes, in Indian astrology, they were called grahas, which means grabbers. It could mean to grasp or to seize, or also to grasp something, as in to understand something. Probably heard me talk about this a lot if you've listened to me talk about the philosophy of ancient astrology. One of the reasons that we study astrology is to recognize or be able to identify the power of the gods, or these archetypes in our everyday experience, because the penalty for not recognizing them and not having a conscious relationship with them is that they often grab or grasp or seize us rather unconsciously and sort of manipulate us like we're puppets on a string. So if we want to live our destiny, live our fate, live in harmony with the gods in a conscious manner, then recognizing their presence on the stage of life is paramount. It's super important. So this series, I just thought, you know what? I get so many stories all the time. I'm reading probably, 100 stories a week, and I usually don't have time to respond to them because there's so many of them, but I read them. And so that's a huge part, I realized, of how I've progressed and developed as an astrologer over the years, not just hearing, on YouTube or my blog when I used to write more, but in client sessions every single day. In my life every single day, training my archetypal eye to notice these powers, these archetypes and gods on the stage of life. The more that you're able to identify them, see them in diverse and like very idiosyncratic situations and people, the more that you're able to, the more your ability to recognize them goes up, your ability to start articulating the powers of the archetypes in readings or in chart delineation goes up. So there's really no downside to hearing more and more astrological stories. You also, as you go, you realize that a lot of the times people are telling you stories that don't have to do with the transit that they think it has to do with it. It'll be some other transit. So that's also interesting too, because sometimes in hearing stories, you'll realize like what is the transit and what is something else. At any rate, the couple of purposes of doing this, what I want to do is, in the chat box, as we're breaking down aspects, I get all these stories. And what I'm going to do is invite people to, what we're doing is we're making an email address. It's going to be called grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. And it's an email address that people can send in their stories to. And those stories will be, if you send us a story, essentially we'll send you a little auto reply saying, that you could potentially use your story in an episode. And these grabbed episodes, what I want to do is, like, maybe it'll be Venus Neptune grabbed episode. And in that episode, what we'll do is I'm just going to break down stories that I'm getting from people so that you guys can hear all of the ridiculous, absurd, funny, serious, beautiful, tragic examples of the archetypes at play. Because I want you guys to see what I see every day behind the scenes. And I think there's a very simple way of doing this for people who are sharing, who are comfortable sharing anonymously, that their story can be read or shared anonymously. So that's what we're in the process of developing. And today, this episode is really I'm just going to share some of the stories that I had this week. And then I'm going to share with you 3 stories that I got anonymously, that I have permission to share with you, from clients and YouTube viewers and stuff like that, about how these transits have played out, just to give you a taste for what this series is hopefully going to evolve into. So probably next week sometime, or in the upcoming weeks, I'll have more information about, once the email address is set up, you can actually email and send us your stories, and we're going to kind of archive them, and then occasionally do episodes where we just focus on maybe an archetypal combination or 2 that's been in the air, and some of the funny or interesting stories that correspond with that archetypal combination. Again, like, why do this? Because if you guys hear, especially if you're students of astrology, if you hear the amount of stories that I do every day and you see them in different combinations, your archetypal eye will develop, your ability to interpret will develop, your expertise potentially as a chart reader will develop. Not only that, but you'll be able to see them more in your own lives, in your own day-to-day experiences. So that's kind of the purpose of doing this. All right, so let's get into it. I'm going to pull up the real-time clock and show you what we're looking at today. I've got 3 stories from viewers about the Mars-Saturn-Uranus dynamic this week, and some of my own to share with you guys that are like just textbook. So, okay, so here it is, and I'm just going to highlight it. It's been perfecting all week. Here's Mars to Uranus perfecting over the weekend. Here's Mars to Saturn, Saturn to Uranus. It's kind of a modern astrology, we call it a T-square. So we have this very powerful dynamic going on. Now, next week, Venus opposed Saturn, square Uranus. Maybe we'll tell some stories about that one. We've got Neptune coming into a square with, or Mercury coming into a square with Neptune. Maybe we'll share something about that. So that's kind of where we're heading with all of this in the next couple of weeks, hoping to gather some stories about those. In the meantime, before we have this set up, by the way, if you guys want to share stories and you're okay with me using it for this series in the next week or two, any transit that you want to share, right into the chat box of the YouTube channel or the chat comment section, put grabbed at the front and then put colon and then just tell your story. And make sure that you let us know which planetary dynamic you're talking about. So you might say, I've got a good story for your grabbed series, and it's on Venus, it's on Mercury Neptune, or it's on the Mars Uranus dynamic, or whatever the case might be. So until we get this email address set up, if you guys want to just leave it in the YouTube comments, and you're okay with me sharing, I won't use your handle or name or anything, but just make sure you put grabbed or hashtag grabbed or something like that in the comments, so that we can pull stories that you're comfortable with us sharing from the comments box until we get the email address set up. So anyway, I'm super stoked about this. This idea occurred to me this week, and I was like, this is the best idea. So I'm excited. All right, so here are my stories that I'm going to share. I'm just going to share mine first, get them out of the way, and then I'll share with you 3 anonymous stories from YouTube audience and clients. All right, so Mars, Saturn, Uranus. I mean, probably the big one for me this week was, and some of you know this because I posted it on the community chat section of YouTube, which is weird. I didn't really know they even had such a thing until I guess a couple of months ago, or maybe last year sometime. I don't remember. Anyway, so I started some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu lessons this week, and it was very Mars, Saturn, Uranus, in the sense that I don't know if you guys know anything about this. I barely know anything about it. So, and I know some people in my audience apparently, go to Jiu-Jitsu classes regularly. So I was actually really stoked to hear that. But the gist of it is that in this class, my experience anyway, it's kind of like a form of grappling / wrestling. It's a martial art. It's meant to teach you how to defend yourself. And you go into class. I mean, this is at least the way that the studio works that I go to. You go into class, you learn some techniques, you practice, you drill the techniques with partners, you switch partners all the time. And then at the end of class, there's a little bit of, okay, now one person is going to try to submit the other person with maybe a chokehold or an arm bar or something like that. And the other person has to basically just try to defend themselves and not get into that position. And then you flip and you do it on the other side, except for if you're like me and you know nothing about it. There really is no other side. It's just defending yourself. And then when it comes your turn, I guess, my partners have all been more, I think I'm probably the only person there who's completely brand new, or maybe there was a few other new people this week or something. But so basically my experience this week was of doing these drills, and yeah, the way that I would put it is getting my ass kicked by some of the nicest people I've met. I think that jujitsu, I don't know if it's the jujitsu itself or if it's just something that it's referred to, but it's called the gentle art, if I remember correctly. And I was really struck by how I was exerting a ton of energy and trying to defend myself, whatever. And these blue belts, there was a purple belt or two that was, kind of helping me learn, but also completely kicking my ass. And they were like Python like rainbow pythons, like not exerting a lot of energy, breathing a lot, and completely dominating me while I was, like basically like in more of a like amped up adrenaline, like super exerting muscle and strength mode. And I thought it was really interesting because it was a display of strength that required, and I heard someone use this phrase, it was like the least amount of effort and how did that phrase go? I'm trying the people who go to BJJ will know this, but it was the least amount of effort and the most safety, and yet you're submitting someone. So it's kind of like you're exerting the least amount of energy, you're doing the least amount of damage or harm, and yet you're bringing someone into submission so they can't hurt you. And like if you see videos of people, like there's great videos on the web of people like stopping a robber or something, and they'll use these techniques, and you can tell like they're not hitting the person, there's no like striking, but they'll submit the person, and they'll do it like pretty quickly and smoothly without like a crazy Hulk burst of like power and strength necessarily. So I feel like my will, Mars, was itself put into like a cosmic headlock this week, and I really couldn't have asked for anything a greater gift. Like it was an exercise in recognizing the shortcoming of a particular mode of strength. And I think what went along with this was the recognition of I want to call it like active passivity. When there was several positions that we had to work in class this week, and one of them was when you're in like you're mounting your partner. Sounds like sexual, but you're mounting your partner, and your knees are kind of straddling them on either side, and you've got them in like a chokehold, and then they have to escape, and they're working these tactics to escape. And when I was in that position, as well as when I was watching some of the people with more experience in that position, one of the things I noticed was that they're in this like very weakened sort of submissive position, and yet they were constantly active in it, like constantly slowly subtly manipulating and moving out of it. And it made me realize that it's like, I think that there's this false dichotomy that we have sometimes. This is all very Mars-Saturn-Uranus, and I'll link it back in a second. It's like this false dichotomy we have between like dominance and submission. Like dominance is on top, and if you submit, you're weak and oppressed and on the bottom. And like that's one expression of the relationship between, let's say, yang and yin. But what I was seeing in this class was that there's a way in which the yang can be incredibly weak, because every time that I tried to step into like really exerting strength, dominance, yang energy, what I noticed was that the subtler, slower, seemingly more submissive or passive position that the other person was in was almost always stronger than me, and would end up, completely flipping the table. So if you think about that yin yang dynamic, there's a little speck of white in the dark, and there's a little speck of dark in the white. And I kept thinking about that, and thinking about how even though something appears like it's still, or it's passive, or it's in a more submissive position, that there's still always activity happening in that space. And eventually from that space, there's, the action moves, and the tables are flipped. And I want to say that it was, as a man, it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever experienced, honestly. I'm not saying that I learned a lot of jujitsu this week, but I feel like I learned something important about like active passivity, and the way in which strength comes through something that seemingly looks a lot more passive or submissive, in the way that there's still always activity in that space. And learning how to find strength in that active passivity is very similar to bhakti yoga, for example, where the standard, like the gold standard of spiritual life, is being in kind of an actively, deliberately surrendered position, but finding action in that space, finding meaningful activity and movement in that space of surrenderedness. And I feel like that was a huge breakthrough for me this week, because so I'll relate it back to the astrology. the sort of masculine piece of myself, what I was really unconscious of. It's like I feel like it's very deeply unconscious for all of us. It doesn't really matter if you're a man or a woman, because there was plenty of women in this class, and I'm sure they were realizing the same thing or had at some point in their journey with this. Um, is that okay? Here's Mars running up against Saturn. Exert your will, blocked. Get your arm in a an arm lock. Get choked out or whatever the case might be in these moves. And again, the people were doing this in ways that were very, like, they were not crazy intense, like dominant. I wasn't like dealing with like jocked out steroid for, like hulks. It was, I mean, I was watching women who were much smaller than me in this class doing this to men. So at any rate, the will runs up against the limit, Saturn. And then by running up against that limit over and over and realizing, oh, there's a different way of using this Mars energy. There's a little speck of white in the dark of the yin. For example, I'd say my biggest breakthrough of the week was last night when I realized that I had defended myself about 5 or 10 seconds longer than I was capable of doing at the beginning of the week. And I heard a friend of mine tell me that, like, you should like look for little things like that, because in the beginning, when you know nothing, it can feel like you're just kind of getting beat up by the whole thing. But being able to like defend myself, I was on the bottom, so I was in a submissive position, and I realized that I just needed to breathe, and I needed to not do anything, and I needed to just kind of just be more aware of like little subtle things that my partner was doing and starting to set up. This did not last long. I ended up in a headlock, so it didn't last long at all. But it was something to learn how to be active in a passive position. And like, I read this study online somewhere and this was maybe years ago now, that said that generally speaking, one of the reasons that women are more dissatisfied in their intimacy with their partner is because they don't often get to be as in the dominant position with men, because weirdly, men's stamina, sexually speaking, goes down when they're in the submissive position. And I'd always thought that was really interesting, because, I mean, at least for me and some of my close friends that I talk to about this, like, I think that holds true for a lot of men, that men may find that their stamina is better as long as they're kind of in control and guiding things in a sexual experience. But I think that, like, one thing that I was just thinking about in this the jujitsu experience is starting to sound really sexual. Sorry, guys. Well, one of the things that I was thinking about is just how men don't often, maybe anybody doesn't get the opportunity to learn how to develop kind of active strength within a submissive place. And submissive, it sounds like I just mean in a yin place, really. So anyway, for me, the point is that this was like a major breakthrough for me psychologically this week. Like, I can't think of a time in recent years where something about my biology, my psychology, my instinctual body had as much of a breakthrough. Okay, so here's the funny thing about this. When I had that like place of hitting this wall the very first night and second night that I went, I felt like really frustrated, and I still do. Like, I'm definitely not over that. I'm sure there's a lot more to come. But interesting thing about it is that, so right after the second experience of just being in that space of like, still, I feel like one of the small lessons I learned, and this has only been a week, so I'm sure there'll be repeated occurrences of this, but it was like, you can't, don't try to exert too much strength here, because your strength isn't really what's going to do the trick in jujitsu. Like, you just raw muscle. That's just not going to work. And I felt really frustrated by that and sort of broken down and beat up about it, honestly. And I woke up in the morning after the jujitsu class, and for 4 hours, my body decided it was time to process another little kidney stone. So some of you guys who follow my channel know that a couple of years ago, I had a kidney stone. It was a really big deal. So that one, I had to go to the hospital, and but this was really thankfully it was small and not, could have been worse. It was like about 4 hours, and then it was over. And the whole time, while the kidney stone was passing, I felt it psychologically connected to, it was like purging this very limited idea of what strength and toughness is about. And it was so healing. I can't, I just, there's nothing else to say like that. And so that was like my breakthrough week. Okay. So then this is funny because I had forgotten that I had also scheduled a chiropractor appointment this week. So I have these jujitsu lessons. I have a little 4 hour, very small, but painful kidney stone. And I've been, well, I'll go into that some other time, but then I have this appointment at the chiropractor. So I go into the chiropractor and I've never been to a chiropractor before, but I decided because I'm at my desk a lot and, I just want to take care of my body. And I've always just like had some advice from another friend of mine who sees a chiropractor, like, go check out a chiropractor. Like maybe they could help you. So it's like, especially just neck back stuff sitting at the desk. I'm sure some of you guys experienced that. Anyway, so I go to chiropractor and had some bodily manipulation done. They do some popping and cracking and manipulating of your spine and stuff like that. And I have to say that was also, such a Mars-Saturn-Uranus moment where my physical skeleton is being manipulated. They're taking x-rays and she's showing me and kind of, helping me explain some things that I can do at home and stuff like that. But that that moment of like having my neck and back and hearing it pop. And I was sitting there and I said, all of a sudden I go, oh my God, this is so Mars-Saturn-Uranus. It's like a physical, sudden sort of violent shift of structure, reorganizing of structural integration changes. And so that's my second one. Finally, we had someone working on something in our offices here and they ended up damaging the wall. So we had to have the wall repaired. So there was structural damage to a wall in our house from a contractor. So my two daughters had some big breakthroughs in their swimming classes. So they were both really scared of their swimming classes. And my one daughter was able to go underneath and go underneath the water with her head and for they count, they do like one monkey, two monkey or something like that. I don't know. So anyway, she was able to go underwater. My other daughter, my youngest one, who was too scared to even get in the pool, got in the pool. And both of them happened on the same day, right after Mars had passed over Saturn. And they were like elated that they had this breakthrough in their physical bodies, that they had gotten past fears, that they had faced them. I was like, this is so Mars, Uranus, Saturn. Then later in the day, they were playing and my one daughter got angry. My younger daughter, my 3-year-old, got angry at my 5.5-year-old, Summer and Gigi. And Summer slammed the door and caught my daughter Gigi's fingers in it. So my daughter Gigi's like thumb was like totally swollen. Like it was awful. So there was a sudden violent injury after their breakthroughs in the swimming pool. Okay. And then finally, last but not least, I realized that this was such a weird thing to come up like to realize, but I had this realization where I was like, I chant every day and I there's a certain set number of rounds that we do every day in the Bhakti tradition. So I was like, okay, I'm going to get a cylinder, like a big cylinder vase. And I'm going to get some of those little marbles, like those little small marbles. And I'm going to start filling the vase with the marbles based on, every day that I do my rounds, I'm going to put it in there. Because one of the things that I heard a guru talk about is that it can be a good thing to have some sense of the numerical commitment that your life has taken on, right? So it's not about numbers, obviously. It's about the quality of your chanting. It's about your consciousness. But when you feel like it's hard to keep up with your commitment, or not that it's hard, but that it's you lack motivation or you don't like doing it or something like that. So sometimes you need ways of standing back and appreciating how far you've come and how many good things have come out of your discipline on days or stretches where you feel a little plateaued. So I came up with this idea of, getting a little vase and putting little marbles in it for, each day that I finish my rounds, and I'm going to fill it with those number that I've already chanted. That way I just get a visual picture of how many days of my life I've given to chanting. And I was realizing that this was going to help me have a breakthrough from the feeling of monotony that's crept into my practice. And I was like, that is so Mars, Uranus, Saturn, isn't it? The monotony, Mars, Saturn of a discipline, Mars, Saturn, and the needing to kind of have a breakthrough from a plateau and coming up with something that can help you kind of remotivate you. And then I realized the only way that I'm going to survive, I think, if I don't know how long I'll last doing this jujitsu, but I'm going to do the same thing in a little separate base for each class that I go to in jujitsu. Because I can tell you right now that one of the things that I find most overwhelming about doing this is it's just really hard to go do something where you get your butt kicked every single night. And so, I had a friend tell me, well, just, try to appreciate the fact that you're showing up. And I was like, well, I could just do the same thing. I can drop some marbles into this thing and maybe I'll last 3 months and quit. Maybe, maybe I'll last 3 years. Maybe, who knows? But just as a way of not coming home and feeling completely and utterly destroyed, I'll put a little marble in this vase for every class that I go to. And those two ideas came up to me in a moment where I was feeling just a little bit defeated and tired in my disciplines. And not that the jujitsu thing's new, but just needing this way of breaking through the feeling of monotony or stuckness, or anticipating how do I deal with that regularly, because that's a part of any discipline. You could easily say the same thing for astrology, So if you're just studying every day, or if you're practicing a sport every day, or working out or something like that, it's like we need our psyches need little ways of appreciating the beauty of our commitment. So I was like, I'm going to get some really beautiful, and they're not just marbles too. I'm going to get something really beautiful. I don't know, maybe I'll get those little cool, like sort of rainbow looking little glass beads or something, but something that I can look at and go, look at that. Look at the beauty of your commitment on days where, I feel like it's not amounting to anything, or I feel overwhelmed by it. So those were some of the things that came up for me this week. Those are my grabbed stories for you. Now, in future episodes, I certainly don't want my stories to just be what it is. I really want maybe I'll share a story or two, but then really highlight your stories, because I want you guys to see how many different diverse stories there are and how conscious we can really be in relating with these transits. I know that if I didn't know astrology this week, I think I would have gotten a lot. There would have been the consequences of these transits could have been a lot more extreme. So here's some stories, 3 that I'll leave you with really quickly. That are, they're brief. So in the future, hopefully we'll have people kind of write things out and I'll be able to fully read them to you. But here are 3 stories from you guys that also reflect the Mars-Saturn-Uranus dynamic. A woman wrote to me saying that her boss became suddenly very rigid, very authoritarian, exerting a ton of machismo. And she was like, he's being grabbed by the transits right now. It must be striking his natal chart in a particularly difficult way. And she felt herself wanting to engage in a power struggle. And because of the work that we've done on this channel, because of the, commitment to studying these archetypes, she said, I'm going to step back and I'm not going to respond. I'm going to be in a position of humility and patience for now. And we're going to revisit this next week after these transits pick up. Yay! That's the way to do it, right? You understand the transits. You understand someone might be getting grabbed around you. And so you just step back. When you do that, you're waving a little flag to the universe, being like, I'm here. I have a will. I'm conscious. I see the gods. The universe, in my experience, the cosmos, the powers of the cosmos start to respect you more, and they start to consider your will, and you're less likely to just get pulled along unconsciously. So congratulations. What a great day in your life. Second one, someone wrote to me about a jet ski collision that they witnessed on the lake that they were they were out boating, and this is here in Minnesota, and that they were out on the lake and they witnessed a jet ski collision. Thankfully, that wasn't high speed, so it was pretty low speed, but a jet ski was coming in, wasn't really paying attention, and ran into a docked boat and tore up the boat and the jet ski pretty badly. And thankfully was not injured badly, but said, I couldn't believe that I saw this this extreme Mars-Saturn accident where there was a major collision right in front of where they were, like right by where they were, and that it could have been a lot worse, if they were going fast or whatever, or faster, but they saw this major collision on a lake right as Mars, Saturn, and Uranus were perfecting. So just observing it and going, wow, there it is. If you see it like that, it really helps you to start to feel the planets in your body. So congrats for noticing that. I mean, it's just a big deal to be able to have that wherewithal to say, oh, there's the archetype. So finally, I have someone who wrote into me saying that they are not a violent person. They have not a violent bone in their body, so to speak. And that they got so mad this week that they punched a wall and sprained their wrist. And they were like, I'm not violent. I don't lash out. I don't get into conflicts or confrontations. I've never been in a fight. And that somehow they got so angry that they ended up punching a wall and spraining their wrist. And then they realized right away, there's Mars, Saturn, Uranus. So were you able to catch it before you hit the wall? No. But were you able to recognize it afterwards and say, look at what just grabbed me? Yes. And that still matters because even being able to address or identify what happened to you afterward, that's hugely important, because being able to identify, even in hindsight, is going to increase your awareness the next time that the energy comes around. So again, congrats. All right. So that is it for this kind of first episode of looking at, being grabbed by the planets. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I would love to hear your stories. Just make sure you put #grabbed or grabbed : tell the story in the chat box. Please don't email us. We're going to have a separate email address set up for just this particular series. If you want to have your story shared with a larger audience, we'd really love it. And I look forward to hopefully gathering more stories from you guys over the weeks to come. All right, that's what I've got for today. Have a great weekend, everyone. Bye.